I had been erased from my own daughter's life, long before I realized I never really existed in it at all. This is a story about what happens when the person you raised decides you were never worth remembering. My name is Margaret, and I spent 63 years believing that love and sacrifice would eventually mean something. I was wrong. It started the morning I received the wedding invitation in the mail. The envelope was thick and expensive with embossed lettering that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Inside was a formal card announcing the marriage of my daughter Claire to someone named Jonathan Whitmore III. The wedding was in 6 weeks. I held that invitation in my hands for a long time, trying to understand why it felt so cold. There was no personal note. No phone call before it arrived. Just my name printed on the envelope like I was a distant cousin, obligated to be informed. I called Claire that evening. She answered on the 4th ring, and her voice had that busy, distracted tone she always used with me now. She confirmed the date and told me the wedding would be at some vineyard 2 hours away. I asked if she needed any help with planning. She said everything was handled. I asked if I could take her to lunch to celebrate. She said she was too busy. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and looked around at the space where I had raised her alone after her father died when she was 7. This was the kitchen where I had packed her lunches every morning for 11 years. The table where we did homework together, the counter where I taught her to bake the lemon cake she always requested for her birthday. I wondered when exactly I had become an obligation instead of her mother. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. I drove 2 hours in my old car wearing the nicest dress I owned, which I had bought 3 years ago. The vineyard was stunning, with rolling hills and string lights and flowers everywhere. I parked and walked toward the entrance where a young woman with a clipboard greeted guests. I gave her my name. She scanned her list and frowned. She excused herself and walked over to another woman who appeared to be the wedding planner. They spoke in low voices while glancing at me. The planner approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She told me there had been a seating confusion. She said the main reception area was completely full. She said they had arranged a lovely spot for me to watch the ceremony from the terrace, and that I would be dining in the adjacent sunroom during the reception. I asked if I could speak to Claire. She said the bride was unavailable until after the ceremony. I followed her directions to the terrace. It was outside the main seating area, separated by a wall of hedges. There were 3 chairs there. An elderly man was already seated in one. He introduced himself as Jonathan's uncle Harold, who had apparently also been placed in overflow seating. We watched the ceremony through gaps in the hedge. I could barely see my daughter as she walked down the aisle. I could hear the music and the officiant, but I couldn't see her face. Uncle Harold made quiet small talk about the weather. I nodded and smiled and felt something inside me go very still. After the ceremony, we were directed to the sunroom. It was a nice room with windows overlooking the garden, but it was not where the reception was happening. Through the windows, I could see the main hall where 200 guests were gathering with champagne and appetizers. The sunroom had 1 table set for 8 people. Besides Harold and myself, there was an older couple who turned out to be distant cousins of the groom. There was a single woman around my age who was introduced as Jonathan's former nanny. There were 2 teenagers who were children of someone's second marriage. And there was 1 empty chair. We were served the same meal as the main reception, but it arrived late and cold. I could hear the music and laughter from the other room. I could hear the MC announcing the first dance. I could hear speeches being made. No one came to get me. No one came to check if I needed anything. Harold was kind and kept trying to include me in conversation. I appreciated it, but I could barely focus on words. I was doing math in my head, counting years and sacrifices and moments that apparently had meant nothing. After Claire's father died, I had worked 2 jobs to keep us in our home. I had skipped meals to make sure she could do gymnastics. I had sewn her costumes for school plays. I had attended every recital, every game, every parent-teacher conference. I had helped her through her first heartbreak and driven her to college and sent her care packages during exam weeks. I had paid for her summer abroad by taking extra shifts at the hotel where I worked as a night manager. I had given her the only piece of jewelry I owned that mattered, which was my mother's pearl necklace for her college graduation. And now I was eating cold chicken in a sunroom with strangers, while my daughter celebrated the biggest day of her life 1 room away. I didn't cry. I just sat very still and quiet. Around 9, the wedding planner appeared and told us we were welcome to leave or stay as we preferred. The main reception would continue until midnight, but the sunroom service was complete. Harold looked at me with genuine concern and asked if I was all right. I told him I was fine and thanked him for his kindness. I walked to my car in the dark. I sat behind the wheel for several minutes. Then I drove 2 hours home. The next morning, Claire sent me a text message. She said thank you for coming. She said she hoped I enjoyed the wedding. She said she and Jonathan were leaving for their honeymoon in Bali and would be out of touch for 3 weeks. I didn't respond. I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and thinking. For weeks afterward, I tried to understand what I had done wrong. I replayed years of memories looking for the moment I had failed her. I wondered if I had been too strict or not strict enough, too involved or too absent, too much or not enough. But the truth arrived slowly like cold water rising. I hadn't done anything wrong. Claire had simply decided that I didn't fit into the life she wanted. I was an embarrassment, a reminder of modest beginnings she wanted to forget. A mother who worked in a hotel instead of a mother who played tennis at the country club. 3 months after the wedding, Claire called. Her voice was bright and warm like nothing had happened. She talked about Bali and the new house they were buying and Jonathan's promotion. She mentioned they were hosting Thanksgiving dinner and I was invited. I asked her why I had been seated away from the reception. There was a pause. She said the venue had limited space. She said they had to make difficult decisions about seating. She said she thought I would be more comfortable in a quieter area. I asked her if she was ashamed of me. Another pause. She said that was ridiculous. She said I was being overly sensitive. She said she had a lot going on and didn't need me making her wedding about my feelings. I told her I understood. I told her I needed to go. I hung up before she could say anything else. I did not go to Thanksgiving dinner. She sent several messages asking why I wasn't coming. I didn't answer them. Christmas arrived and she sent a card with a photo of her and Jonathan in matching sweaters in front of an enormous decorated tree. There was a gift card inside for $50 to a chain restaurant. No personal note. I put the card in a drawer and didn't cash the gift card. The silence between us stretched into months. I waited to feel sad, but instead I felt something else. Clarity. In February, my sister Ruth called me. Ruth lived in Arizona, and we talked every few weeks. She asked how Claire was doing. I told her about the wedding. Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I will never forget. She said that sometimes our children become strangers, and we have to decide if we will beg for crumbs or walk away with our dignity. She said I had spent enough years making myself small. She said it was time to stop. I thought about that conversation for days. I realized Ruth was right. I had been shrinking myself for years, trying to fit into whatever space Claire would allow me. Always grateful for any attention. Always apologizing for needing anything. Always pretending that neglect was just her being busy. I decided I was done. In March, I did something I had never done before. I started living for myself. I signed up for a watercolor painting class at the community center. I joined a book club at the library. I started taking walks every morning. I made friends with a woman named Diane who also took the painting class. We started having coffee together on Saturdays. For the first time in years, I felt light. Claire called in April. She needed something. She and Jonathan were buying a bigger house and needed help with the down payment. She explained that Jonathan's parents had already contributed, and it would mean so much if I could help too. She suggested $20,000. I told her I didn't have that kind of money. She sounded surprised. She said she thought I had savings. I explained that I had savings for my retirement and for emergencies. She said this was important. She said family helps family. I found that statement remarkable coming from her. I told her I couldn't help. She became cold. She said she was disappointed. She said she thought I would want to invest in her future. I told her I wished her well and ended the call. She didn't contact me again for 2 months. In June, my brother Michael passed away suddenly. Michael lived 3 states away, and we hadn't been close in recent years. But his death shook me. The funeral was small. Claire did not attend. She sent a text saying she couldn't get time off work. At the funeral, I reconnected with my cousin Edward. Edward was a lawyer, and we talked about family and life, and he asked about Claire. I gave him a brief overview. He listened carefully. Then he asked me something unexpected. He asked if I had updated my will recently. I admitted I hadn't looked at it in over a decade. He suggested I might want to review it. He said people change, and our plans should reflect our current relationships, not our past hopes. I made an appointment with Edward the following week. We went through my modest estate. I had my small house, which was paid off. I had about $70,000 in retirement savings. I had a life insurance policy through my old job worth $50,000. And I had a few personal items, including some jewelry and my mother's antique china set. My old will left everything to Claire. Edward asked me if that was still what I wanted. I sat in his office for a long time. Then I told him what I wanted instead. I left the house to my sister Ruth. I left half of my savings to Ruth and half to my friend Diane, who had become like family. I left the life insurance policy divided between several charities I cared about. I left my mother's china to Harold, the kind uncle from the wedding, who had tracked me down months later to apologize for how I had been treated. And I left Claire a box. Inside that box, I placed every card and letter and photo from her childhood. Every report card I had saved, every drawing she had made me, every program from every event I had attended. I included the receipts I still had from her gymnastics and her college expenses and her summer abroad. I included a brief letter. The letter said that I hoped these memories would help her understand what love looked like when it was given freely without conditions or expectations. I said I hoped she would find happiness. I said I forgave her. And I said goodbye. Edward filed the new will. I felt an enormous weight lift. 2 years passed. I didn't hear from Claire except for occasional impersonal text messages on holidays. I built a life that felt full. I traveled to Arizona to visit Ruth. I took a painting workshop in Santa Fe. I volunteered at the library. I grew my hair long again because I had always kept it short for convenience, but I realized I liked it long. I started wearing colors I actually enjoyed instead of the neutral beiges I thought made me invisible. I laughed more. I worried less. I stopped waiting for my daughter to see me. Last month, I was diagnosed with a heart condition. It's serious but manageable with medication and lifestyle changes. The doctor said I likely have many good years ahead if I take care of myself. I called Ruth and told her. I called Diane and told her. I updated my medical directives with Edward. I did not call Claire. 3 days ago, Claire called me. Her voice was different. Uncertain. She said she had been thinking about me. She said she wanted to have lunch. She suggested a restaurant near her house. I agreed. We met yesterday. She looked polished and expensive. She hugged me briefly and it felt like hugging a stranger. We ordered food and made small talk. Then she started talking about family. She said she had been reflecting on what matters. She said she realized she hadn't been as present as she should have been. She said she wanted to do better. She asked about my health. I told her I was managing some heart issues but was doing well. Her expression shifted slightly. She asked if it was serious. I said it was under control. She nodded slowly. Then she started talking about her worries. She said she and Jonathan were stressed about money. She said the new house was expensive. She said they wanted to start a family, but everything cost so much. She said she had been thinking about the future. She asked if I had thought about what would happen to my house when I was gone. There it was. The real reason for lunch. I looked at my daughter across the table. I saw a woman who had calculated that I might die soon and wanted to secure her inheritance. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just a quiet sense of completion. I told her I'd taken care of everything. I told her she didn't need to worry. She looked relieved. She started talking about how grateful she was and how much it meant to know I was thinking of her future. I let her talk. When lunch ended, she hugged me again. She said we should do this more often. She said she loved me. I smiled and said goodbye. I drove home in the afternoon sunlight. I thought about the woman I used to be who would have broken apart at this realization. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I had already grieved the daughter I thought I had. I had already built a life that didn't require her validation, and I had already made my peace. Claire will find out eventually what I left her. She will open that box and see her childhood reflected back at her. She will realize that I gave her everything when it mattered, and she will have to sit with what she chose to do with that gift. Maybe it will change her. Maybe it won't. Either way, it's no longer my concern. I am 65 now. I have a heart condition and a modest life and a small circle of people who actually see me. I have my art and my books and my Saturday morning coffee with Diane. I have my dignity. And I have the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I didn't beg for crumbs. I didn't make myself smaller. I didn't spend my final years trying to earn love from someone who had already decided. I wasn't worth it. I walked away. And in walking away, I found something I hadn't expected. I found myself. Last night, I painted a watercolor of the vineyard where Claire got married. I painted it from my memory of sitting on that terrace. But in my painting, the view is beautiful. The sky is full of color, and the woman sitting alone is peaceful, because she knows that being unseen by the wrong people is not the same as being invisible. She knows her worth. And she knows that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go.